I've been working at this beachwear shop in Florida for about 5 years now, starting as a sales associate and working my way up to assistant manager. The shop is part of this huge strip mall right by the beach. You know the type. Always packed with tourists trying to get their hands on swimsuits and sunscreen. The location is prime real estate, which means the parking situation is always a nightmare, especially during peak season. When I got promoted to assistant manager last year, I had to learn all sorts of new protocols, including dealing with a private security company that patrols our strip mall. They're pretty serious about their job, especially when it comes to the loading bay behind our shops. There are signs everywhere saying, "No parking, loading zone only, violators will be towed." But people still try their luck all the time. It was a busy Saturday evening and I was finishing up my closing shift. The store had been slammed all day with spring break tourists, and I was looking forward to getting home and ordering some takeout. I just finished counting the registers and was heading out through the back door when this guy appears out of nowhere. He immediately demanded to know where his car was. I wasn't in the mood for this, but I tried to keep it professional. I suggested that if he couldn't find his car, security could check the lot for him. He insisted that he had parked his car right here and wanted to know its location. I explained that if he had parked in this area, security might have had it towed. He accused me of towing his car, to which I clarified that while I hadn't towed it, security might have. He started getting angry, saying he knew I worked there and demanded to speak to a manager. I tried explaining that while I was the manager on duty at my store, I didn't work for the district, but he cut me off before I could finish. He started ranting about how he'd been coming here for years and they'd never touched his car before, calling it unacceptable and demanding that I have it returned immediately. I simply told him that I couldn't untow his car. That's when things started getting ugly. His face turned bright red and he started getting in my personal space. He called me a piece of garbage and threatened both my job and my safety, saying he'd make me regret not getting his car back. He was practically spitting in my face at this point. His fists clenched as he threatened to beat my face in if I didn't fix the situation right away. I was starting to get genuinely concerned, but then I spotted one of our regular security guards doing his rounds. I'd dealt with him before. Really professional guy who takes no nonsense. I waved him over and I could see the entitled guy's whole demeanor change. He actually started smirking, probably thinking the security guard would side with him. The guard asked how things were going and I explained that this was the person whose car had been towed earlier and that he was now threatening to beat me up. I requested that he be trespassed from the property. The entitled guy's smirk disappeared real quick. He tried to backpedal, claiming that I had his car towed illegally and emphasizing that he was a regular customer. The security guard shut him down quickly, stating that he had personally called for the tow and questioning him about the threats he'd made against me. The entitled guy immediately denied making any threats, calling it ridiculous. The security guard got on his radio and within minutes, two more guards showed up. The entitled guy started getting even more agitated, shouting about how much money he spent at the complex and threatening to sue everyone involved. The security guard calmly told him that he was being trespassed from the property, explaining that this meant he was banned from entering any of the stores in the complex and would be arrested for trespassing if he returned. The entitled guy completely lost it. He started screaming every profanity you can imagine, actually spat at one of the guards, which is assault by the way, and had to be physically escorted off the property. I later found out he tried to come back the next day to speak to the real manager and got arrested on the spot. His car was impounded for the weekend because the tow company was closed until Monday and the fees were astronomical. Plus, now he can't shop at any of the stores in our strip mall anymore. And we're talking about the biggest shopping complex in the area with over 50 stores, including the only high-end grocery store within 20 miles. I've been playing golf since I was pretty young. While I wouldn't say I'm amazing at it, I really enjoy the sport and have been steadily improving over the years. Our high school has this great policy where you can join sports teams starting from 7th grade, even though high school technically starts in 9th grade. I jumped at the opportunity back then and joined the golf team. Sure, I was terrible and never played an actual match, but it was still an awesome experience. 8th grade was a write off because of the pandemic, but I was super excited to rejoin the team in 9th grade. I had gotten much better, and things were going great for a couple of months. I even played in 2 matches. But then I received some devastating news. My great grandpa, who was 93, was experiencing fatal liver failure. This hit me hard. My great grandpa was the funniest person in our family, always cracking jokes and making everyone smile. He was moved to hospice care, which is basically where they focus on making someone comfortable in their final days rather than trying to cure them. Now, here's where things get messy. Our head golf coach used to be pretty decent back in 7th grade. He helped me improve a lot, and I actually became one of the better players on the team because of his guidance. But this year, he turned into a completely different person. The day I found out about my great grandpa going into hospice, we had a scheduled match. I was supposed to be in the first group, but I couldn't bring myself to go. My parents, being the amazing people they are, completely understood and let me stay home. I spent that time FaceTiming with my great grandpa, which helped me feel a bit better. When I went to practice the next day, everyone was asking where I'd been. I just mentioned it was family issues, and most people were understanding. Except for this one kid on our team, probably the most entitled person I've ever met. He acts like he's better than everyone else, and the ironic part, he absolutely hates golf. My friends and I are pretty sure his parents are forcing him to play. This entitled kid had to fill in for me during the match, and apparently, he didn't like that one bit. The next day at practice, our head coach pulled me aside. He asked me why I hadn't shown up to the match yesterday. I explained that I had some family issues going on. That's when his voice started rising. He told me he didn't care about my family and that when he sets a game time, I needed to come no matter what. I was shocked and told him that my great grandpa had just been put into hospice and could die any week, explaining that I felt my family was more important than a school sport. That's when he completely lost it. He told me not to come to practice anymore, saying that if I couldn't play on the team when asked to, I would never play on the team again. I was about to break down and just walk home. Thankfully, I live close to the course, but that's when our assistant coach stepped in. We'll call him the good coach. He came over and asked what was going on. The head coach immediately told him that I wasn't being a proper member of the team and he was removing me from it. The good coach asked for more details about what I'd done wrong, so I calmly explained the situation with my great grandpa. The good coach was understanding and told me he'd get everything cleared up and to just enjoy the rest of my practice. The head coach left practice early that day, and we later found out why. Apparently, that entitled kid had gone crying to his parents about having to fill in for me, and they called the head coach to complain. The head coach, being who he is, took their side completely. The reason he left practice early was because the good coach had called the school administration, and they fired him right then and there. I'm still on the golf team now, playing better than ever, and I make sure to visit or FaceTime with my great grandpa almost every day. I'm a pizza delivery driver who's been working at the same place for about 3 years now. Life's been pretty rough lately. My mom passed away last year, and my dad remarried someone who made it clear I wasn't welcome in their new family dynamic. So I moved out, got this job, and have been making it work since then. Last Sunday was Mother's Day, and I picked up an extra shift since I didn't have any plans. It was actually a relief to keep busy rather than thinking about everything. We were short-staffed, and I've been running deliveries non-stop since morning. Just before closing time, we got this huge order. 6 pizzas for the local senior center. I delivered there plenty of times before, and they were usually great customers, so I didn't mind taking one last run. When I got there, I noticed it was some kind of Mother's Day event. There was this lady at the front desk who checked my temperature and gave me a new mask. I found the event room and dropped off the pizzas, but realized they hadn't tipped on the credit card payment. So I had to track down whoever placed the order. I went around asking for Margaret, explaining that she had ordered the pizzas. When I finally found her, she was quite frazzled looking. Before I could even finish explaining that I delivered the pizzas, she cut me off excitedly. She told me they'd been waiting for me and mentioned someone named Bonnie who hadn't been matched with anyone yet. Then she wheeled over this elderly lady and introduced me as if I was there specifically for Bonnie. The old woman responded with a joke about not getting too attached because Jesus had her heart. Before I could explain the misunderstanding, Margaret had disappeared into the crowd. I tried explaining to an event organizer that I was just the delivery guy. When I mentioned delivering pizzas, she completely misunderstood and praised me for bringing food to the event. She handed me some cash and walked away before I could clarify anything. Meanwhile, Bonnie had already wheeled herself to a card table, clearly expecting me to follow. Eventually, I overheard other conversations and realized this was a volunteer event for women in the senior home who didn't have family visiting for Mother's Day. That's when I decided to just go with it. We played bridge, she destroyed me, did some arts and crafts, and she insisted on a courtyard walk. She asked about my job and life, and when I mentioned winning Employee of the Month at the pizza place, she couldn't contain her excitement. She proudly announced to everyone we passed that her boy was Employee of the Month. When I told her about my landlord refusing to fix my heating, she got hilariously outraged. She called him a ripe hair in the tuna and mentioned knowing someone who could tune him up. When I said I'd stick to filing maintenance requests, she just shrugged and cryptically added that her guy worked quickly and didn't ask questions. Later, she insisted on having some pizza, which caused a problem with one of the nurses. The nurse tried to stop her, explaining that Bonnie wasn't allowed pizza due to dietary restrictions. Bonnie brushed off the warning by claiming she had fought in 2 wars and could handle pepperoni. When I asked about the wars, she admitted with a laugh that she'd just watched them on television, but insisted it was the same thing. Somehow she ended up with 3 slices, though I swear I only gave her 2. The last activity was watching game shows in her room, but she fell asleep almost immediately. I left her our pizza place's coupon, even though she probably shouldn't use it, and headed home. The next day, my manager called me into his office. Apparently, Margaret had finally realized her mistake when the actual volunteer showed up late. She'd called our pizza place to complain about me infiltrating their event and demanded I be fired for deceiving them. My manager gave me a stern look before bursting into laughter. He asked me to confirm if I'd really accidentally volunteered at the senior center because they wouldn't listen to my explanations about being the delivery guy. When I confirmed this and mentioned they'd paid me, he told me to keep the money, calling it hazard pay for dealing with confused event organizers. Then he mentioned that Bonnie had called earlier to order a pizza. When I reminded him that she wasn't supposed to have pizza, he said she'd predicted I'd say that, and added that she'd said she'd see me next Mother's Day, volunteer or not. I still deliver to the senior center regularly now, but I make sure to wear my work cap so there's no confusion. Though honestly, that Mother's Day mix-up was the best delivery mistake I've ever made. After working 60-hour weeks for 5 years straight at my consulting job, I finally saved enough money to buy my dream house. It wasn't a mansion or anything, but it had everything I wanted. 3 bedrooms, a decent-sized backyard with a pool, and a beautiful patio with a built-in barbecue. The neighborhood seemed perfect too, quiet and well-maintained. The first week after moving in was bliss. I spent my days arranging furniture, setting up my home office, and enjoying peaceful evenings by the pool. That's when everything started going downhill. I was working from home when I heard splashing sounds coming from my backyard. Looking through my window, I saw about 10 people I'd never met before having a pool party. Kids were jumping into the water, adults were lounging on my patio furniture, and someone was using my barbecue. In complete shock, I went outside to investigate. I politely asked them what they were doing in my backyard. A woman in an expensive-looking swimsuit turned to me with a condescending smile. I'd soon learn that the neighbors called her Karen. She welcomed me to the neighborhood in a sickeningly sweet voice, explaining that they were just having their regular Tuesday pool party. Confused, I repeated her words, questioning the concept of a regular pool party in my backyard. Karen casually explained that the previous owners had always let them use the pool, describing it as a neighborhood thing where they took turns hosting different days of the week. I told her that this was my private property and that I had never agreed to host any parties. Karen dismissed my concerns, calling me ridiculous and insisting that this was a community-oriented neighborhood where they shared amenities. I stood my ground, emphasizing that this was my house that I bought with my money, and asked them to leave. Karen responded by pointing out how selfish I was being, mentioning that the children were already in the pool and they'd started grilling. Getting frustrated, I warned them that I would call the police if they didn't leave my property immediately. Instead of complying, Karen pulled out her phone and started recording. She began dramatically announcing to everyone present that I was threatening to call the police on children, lamenting about how this exemplified everything wrong with society today and my lack of community spirit. Other adults joined in the protest. One parent complained about how disappointed their kids would be, mentioning they'd been swimming here every Tuesday for years. Another suggested calling the Homeowners Association. I had to inform them that there was no homeowners association in this neighborhood, something I'd specifically checked before buying. I gave them one final warning to leave. I went inside and called the police. When they arrived, Karen tried to make her case about me disrupting established community practices, but fortunately the officers understood property rights better than she did. They cleared everyone out and I immediately called a locksmith to install better security. The next day I found printed flyers in all my neighbors' mailboxes. Karen had called for an emergency community meeting to discuss my antisocial behavior and violation of neighborhood traditions. The flyer even included a detailed schedule of when different families were supposed to use my pool, patio, and most shockingly, specific rooms in my house that she had designated as community spaces. According to her schedule, my home office was supposed to be a community playroom on weekdays, and my kitchen was available for neighborhood use every weekend. She'd even listed my refrigerator as community storage for pool party supplies. I took photos of everything and contacted my lawyer. While this was happening, Karen organized her meeting in the local park. When I didn't attend, she and a group of neighbors came to my house with the results of their community vote. Karen announced that the neighborhood had voted and I'd been asked to leave. When I questioned the absurdity of being asked to leave my own house that I owned, she threatened that if I wouldn't respect their community's traditions, I wasn't welcome there. I pointed out the obvious, that they couldn't vote people out of their own homes. Karen ominously warned that we'd see about that and that I'd regret not cooperating with them. The next few weeks were a nightmare of escalating harassment. Karen and her supporters called the police on me multiple times for suspicious activity, just me living in my own house. They filed complaints about non-existent noise violations. Someone even tried to break into my backyard at night to use the pool. Finally, my lawyer had enough evidence. We filed for a harassment restraining order against Karen and sent cease and desist letters to everyone involved in the harassment campaign. The real turning point came when we discovered Karen had been charging some families pool membership fees for access to my pool. That's when we added fraud to the legal complaints. The day Karen was served with the legal papers, she had another meltdown in front of my house. This time I had security cameras recording everything as she screamed about destroying the community spirit and tried to encourage the neighborhood kids to jump my fence for one last swim. In the end, Karen was forced to pay damages for the harassment campaign and fraud. She put her house up for sale 2 months later, but not before my lawyer made sure that any real estate agent had to disclose her legal history to potential buyers. Turns out nobody wanted to buy a house next to a pool they couldn't use, especially with the added baggage of legal troubles. After Karen left, several neighbors apologized to me. Apparently, she'd been pulling similar stunts for years, gradually pushing boundaries and bullying people into compliance. My refusal to give in had finally broken her power over the neighborhood. Now, I actually do host the occasional pool party, but only for the neighbors who apologized and respected my boundaries afterward. It's amazing how much more pleasant community spirit can be when it's based on mutual respect rather than entitlement.